everyone. Welcome to TSP Weekly. This is your tech startup podcast for Friday, June 20th, 2014. Today, we're recording once again at the Center for Entrepreneurship at the Dune campus of Conestoga College. Thank you once again, Conestoga, for letting us use your space. My name is Darren Conley. I'm a local tech entrepreneur here in Kitchener-Waterloo. And with me, as always, is my co-host, fellow tech entrepreneur, Stephen Campbell. How are you today, Stephen?
I'm doing well, Darren. I've fallen victim to crippleware, though.
Crippleware.
I'm not talking about my shirt. No.
You always have a nice, cool, neat term that I've never heard before.
Crippleware is it's very disturbing to me because I've been using a new service called RDO.
All right.
Radio.
All right.
And it crippled me. It said, thank you very much, but if you're not going to pay us anymore, you can't use our free service.
So crippleware is essentially like you try something out for free and then it stops working partway through.
Exactly. It's the free trial. It's the upgraded version.
Right.
So Radio got me, and then Just In Mind Prototyper also got me with that.
Oh.
Just this week.
Right.
So those two tools that I've been using and enjoying now really want me to pay for them.
I think that at WhatsApp that just got bought up by Facebook had some sort of arrangement like that too, right? It's free for the first year, and then it's $1 after that.
That I could live with, I think.
Yeah?
It's the $20 a month that I'm not really wild about.
Fair enough.
So.
Well, we should introduce our guests here today. We have our special guest in today's episode, Mr. Shrad Rao from Wagepoint. I hope I've pronounced your name properly there, Shrad.
No, you butchered it. I'm very unhappy.
I'm so sorry.
It's Wagepointed.
No, I'm totally teasing you. You did a great job.
Oh, excellent. Okay. And I should mention, we'll get into Wagepoint a little bit later, but just for those who are wondering, Wagepoint is essentially a company that takes care of payroll for small, medium, large businesses, maybe just small and medium?
Small and medium.
Small and medium, eliminating a lot of those headaches and making things easy for people. But we'll dive into the details of that, I think, after we've talked a little bit about some tech news. I should mention also, before we get into the tech news, listeners who are paying close attention to our recording dates will notice that we just put up an episode yesterday and we're recording another one today. We had some kind of interesting scheduling reshuffles in the last week or two. Yeah, that's right. And, we really wanted to make sure we could take advantage of when our guests are available, because we have such amazing people like Shrad here that we get to talk to. And so that's why we're kind of recording two podcasts, one after the other, rather than weekly. But we didn't get around to doing one last week, so this will kind of fill in the gap that way. So just you're getting more bang for your buck, for your free buck. But let's talk a little bit of tech news here, guys.
We're not going to charge you later. This isn't crippleware. This isn't free for the first year and then podcast $1 later.
That's right. At least we haven't.
Don't worry.
We haven't planned to implement that model yet. You never know.
I'm not a fan of that business strategy, but
no?
we'll talk.
If I get to the point where I can't eat anymore and we need a way to make some money,
we'll be charging for the podcast
once we have a fan base, right?
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
But let's talk about this. There's an article that came out recently about Thalmic Labs, and Thalmic Labs, I think, at least in this area where we are in Kitchener-Waterloo, is fairly well known. One of the major successes in this area, recent successes, putting out an armband, which allows you to control your various digital devices with gestures. So a lot of people operate in the gestural space, but Thalmic has especially picked up a lot of traction, a lot of attention, because their armband, it actually fits just below the elbow, and my understanding of it is it measures kind of the movements and the tendons and the muscles, so that it knows the position of your hand, your wrist, what's going on with the whole arm. It's not like a glove where it has more limited kind of sensitivity that way. Why do I bring them up? So this article has said they've just finalized the design of the armband. It's called the Mio? How would you guys pronounce it? MYO?
I think it's Mayo.
Mayo? Yeah. Let's go with Mayo.
We'll have to ask them.
We will, and hopefully we'll have them on the show one day.
Yeah, I think Mayo's correct.
Okay, so the Mayo design. Now I've looked at this, and we'll put the link to the article in the post for the podcast, so you guys can find it as well. It's on CBC News' website, but it looks kind of like a a bunch of small rectangular boxes, kind of linked together with an elastic kind of band or a couple bands, a one-size-fits-all kind of design. Have you guys followed any of the developments with the Mayo bracelet or seen any of their videos? What do you think?
Yeah, I have. I mean, it's pretty cool. I think that the idea is for them to have an app store that works in tandem with this device, so that, for example, if you were looking for a particular app to, present by just moving your hands, which is, I believe, how they actually started off in their prototypes, that would be. You could download an app and use it with that device.
Now, I'm assuming too that they're integrating this device into existing applications as well. So I don't have to buy a new version of PowerPoint if I want to use it as a gestural control device with PowerPoint. I can just maybe download a plugin or something like that.
Yeah,
maybe we'll have to ask them.
Yeah,
it looked really cool. Like some of the applications for it, it's almost like an Xbox Connect, but it's taking it to a much finer point, so you can see finger and wrist and swipes and almost sort of the cell phone gestures on a much finer level than the Xbox, which is arm waves and foot kicks and stuff like that.
Right.
So the stuff that I had seen was videos of them being able to manipulate surgical devices and surgical things with the armband, and being able to. One guy was, I think, slicing up an onion and was able to swipe an iPad video, or pause a video in his recipe, and then rewind it to see how much onion did I have to put in this thing or something.
Which is nice
neat.
For not having to get your iPad all oniony.
Gucked up. Yeah, exactly.
I would like it for it to cut the onion for me.
Absolutely.
That would be the ultimate.
Yeah, if they can flip bacon, then we're in. I have some scars.
Yeah, a bacon-making robot. That's kind of the pinnacle of robotics technology, maybe, huh?
I like that.
We also saw, if you look at their video, they show kind of controlling robots, talking about robots, or those quadcopters that you can navigate them using this armband. But apparently, now that they've finalized the design, this should be ready to be released to the general public at some point in the near future.
And I think they had been doing developer packages of them where you could get sort of an armband and do some development of it on your own. We actually met at Thalmic Labs, Darren, if you remember. It was, I think, the first Hacker's Nest event that I went to.
Right.
And we met there, and I was very impressed with their facility.
I didn't know they were so large, actually. When I went there, they have, it looks like, I'm sure they have at least like 40 or 50 employees, maybe even more. I thought they were still a relatively modest startup.
Right.
And they've really just taken off. It's very surprising, but
really impressive space. We were there till about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and a lot of the employees sort of came out and had a couple drinks and had some food, and then a lot of them went back to their desks, and I watched them put their headphones back on. And I don't know if they were working or what they were doing, but they certainly felt at home, and it was really neat to see that. All the employees just sort of stopped working, came and hung out with us for a couple hours, and then some went home, I'm sure, but a lot of them just hung out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice, to kind of see local folks making things that are getting worldwide attention.
Yeah, they were definitely the success story. They were doing it well. Right. Big kitchen and a huge whiteboard and a lot of energy and a lot of youth and a lot of knowledge there. And
they had,
I think, flash.
They had an N64, I think, there too. I remember seeing people playing. It was one of the old school game systems.
Yeah, Donkey Kong Country, or what was
or maybe SNES or something.
Oh no! Don't tease me.
So one other quick question then about the MeArmband. Could you guys see yourselves making use of a device like this? Is this something that you think to yourself, I want to buy one of these, own one myself, and use it for whatever? What do you think?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I think that I think it's basically what's going to happen in the future. I think just like mouse, the mouse and all kinds of interface devices that eventually, everything's going to get flipped on its head, and this is a really good another way to interface with devices, which I think is just the way of the future.
Could you see yourself wearing a device like this for several hours at a time, or throughout the workday, or maybe something you just kind of put on and take off as you need to use it, or What do you think,
Yeah, I see
Steven?
it as a real like Iron Man kind of thing when he was in his lab,
Right.
and he would put his arms up, and then he was in his computer.
Right.
So I see it sort of like that. I did a lot of. I'm in the ITID program here at Conestoga College, so I did a lot of design work on mobile apps and stuff, and a lot of my stuff that I like to do was outside of the screen.
Right.
So I wasn't constrained by a context of an iPad or a phone or something like that. So I liked really customizable UIs where you were able to do kind of what I envision is that Iron Man thing, and the Mio would enable me to be in sort of a matrix world and do that kind of stuff. So I haven't seen a whole lot of usability stories that I understand. The recipe and the cutting up of the onion was one.
Right.
I don't know that I'm going to be a doctor needing to do CAT scan, look at different X-rays, and while I'm doing surgery, but that doesn't make sense to me. I guess
Sure.
it could, but I see more applications like that Iron Man thing where I'm
if
playing a
you're
video
doing
game, I'm
design work,
watching Game of Thrones, I'm doing an Excel spreadsheet, and you're sort of multitasking.
I've seen a lot of the kind of examples they have are people playing, a first-person shooter or something, and using this as a control mechanism. So maybe that's, a good entry point for the average consumer. I don't know if I necessarily need to pay $150 for a device that's just going to be like
Pause your recipe for cutting onions.
Yeah, or flicking the back button as I'm web surfing or something like that. But I could see it for gaming or maybe some more involved applications, like you're saying, design work or medical applications.
You can combine it with the Oculus Rift. So you put that on your head, you put those on your legs and arms.
That's true. If some kind of immersive experience.
And soon you become Iron Man.
Then you're off.
I think that's what we might
Then
all
you're
be just
saving the
working
world.
towards, Iron Man.
We will all be Tony Stark at some point in the future.
Well, other people build the stuff and we just use it.
Oh, okay.
That'd be
sure.
fine.
I got no problem with that either. Let's move on here, guys. Wanted to look at another local company, actually, ClearPath Robotics. They're celebrating their fifth anniversary. Have you guys both heard of ClearPath before? Does it ring a bell?
Yep.
Maybe, maybe not. If you don't hang out in robot circles, maybe not as much. But
yeah, not so much. I mean, I've heard of it, but I don't actually know what they do. Why don't you tell us, Darren?
Well, the only thing that I know about them is really I saw them do a quick pitch at a Communitech event here locally, just talking about their story, and they're developing robots for how to. Robots that would help you complete tasks in difficult to navigate terrains or situations or dangerous places. So, I'm thinking of, mining or the petroleum industry where you're having, nauseous gases and you have tasks that need to be completed.
Search and rescue in case of a disaster.
Yeah, that's right. They have military applications that they're using these robots for as well. But as part of their 5th anniversary, they posted on their website a special kind of interface where they've hooked up one of their robots through a Twitter account, and they're enabling people to send commands to this robot through Twitter. So according to what I've seen on the article here, if you tweet to @ClearPath Robotics with the hashtag #MoveRobot, you can send it commands like left, right, forward, backwards. They haven't listed all of them here. I think they're expecting people to kind of learn on their own what you have to do to make it work. And then there's a live video feed also where you can see if this robot is responding to you. I think it's a cool idea. Now, Stephen, I know you were playing around with it a lot yesterday.
Yeah, we've been looking at it for the last 3 days in a row, I guess. So
Right.
it's been interesting. I really wanted to see something. It looks like the ClearPath is sending commands to it to change lights and to move it around a bit. We had limited success having it follow our commands.
Yeah, I sent a few through my Twitter account, and it kind of popped up on the live video feed. There's a kind of a line of text that tells you, what commands are coming in. So I saw my text coming in there, but I didn't see the robot actually do anything.
Yeah, we watched and we never did see it jump.
Right. Or even I tried sending it, move it left or right or whatever, but yeah, not a lot of response. So I don't know if that maybe their interface is broken, but let's ask a broader question here. What do you guys think of this idea of kind of this connection between hardware and the online world, sending a tweet to make a piece of hardware respond. I've heard of, there are other services where you can do like virtual hunting. I don't know if you guys have heard of these kind of places where you have like a rifle set up with a remote control in the middle of the forest somewhere and a video screen, and I can potentially sit in my living room, pay a certain amount of money and go deer hunting in real life from the other side of the country or the other side of the world, using this virtual interface and essentially controlling a piece of hardware through commands given over the web. Do you think this is just something that's kind of gimmicky? Do you think this is something that in the future we're going to see a lot more of this kind of thing happening, or what do you think?
It actually sounds a bit dangerous. So if you think about it, if you can hunt deer, then what comes next, right?
Yeah, it's like drone hunting. It's really weird. I'm not a hunter, but that's exactly where my mind went, and I had not heard of that before.
Sure.
But when you started that, I thought you could sit there with a gun and wait till something came in front of it and shoot it. And so that's weird that I went there before you even talked about it, and I had no knowledge of that.
Right.
That scares me a bit too. But
yeah, I think we're pretty. All three of us would be futurists, right? Like we like technology, but there is, I think, when somebody from another part of the world can shoot somebody, and you can't find that person.
Sure.
That just doesn't sound like a reasonable way to use technology.
Well, maybe that was too grim an example. I mean, I'm sure there are.
So I think it's you.
Maybe there's like a cute puppy dog you can play with, from online or something. Something like this would be a better, less scary example to bring up of this technology.
But I think like recently there was a robot that passed the test.
Oh, the Turing Test.
The Turing Test, yes.
Yeah.
And it actually successfully convinced enough people that it was a 13-year-old boy.
Sure.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think that's cool stuff, right? That's
sure.
Was that the singularity?
But I don't think we're quite at the singularity yet. And maybe we should just clarify. I'm assuming most people who listen to our podcast are relatively tech savvy, but for those who don't know what the Turing Test is or are too lazy to look it up on Wikipedia, the idea is there is a test where you have a conversation with a computer program, and there's a certain percentage of testers that it needs to fool into thinking that it is a real person on the other end of that conversation. I think it's 20%. If it can fool 20% of so many testers into thinking that it's somebody of at least I think at least 13 or 12 years old, then it's past that test, and we've crossed a threshold here in AI design. Apparently, is the idea behind it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I thought that might make bigger ripples in the news than it did, but I think the average person hears something like that and was like, "Huh, all right."
Yeah, I guess the implications are something that are known right now, right?
I think that's what it is. It's almost like the huge particle collider over in Switzerland, and you hear about they've discovered dark matter, and you go, "That is amazing." I don't know what that means really, but that's awesome. So it's kind of like that with this. You're like, "Holy moly, we passed the Turing test," and I don't know what that means really, but that's got to be really exciting for somebody in that field that's studying it and knows,
Sure.
But for the layman, you're sort of like, I don't understand the ripples that would have.
Yeah. And my thought too, when we're talking about hardware being controlled over the internet, I think we're still kind of in the gimmick phase, for lack of a better word, right? Like, I think it'll be a while before we discover some really useful ways that we can kind of have those two technologies interacting in a beneficial way. But
I think it'll be sooner than people think, because it is Moore's law and all.
Sure.
But at the same time, you're totally right. It is in the look what we can do here. Like, look, Ma, check this out.
Yeah, I've never shot a deer, and immediately I thought I could shoot a deer on my computer, and then I think, well, that would be the most unrewarding thing you could ever do in your life, like,
because you want the blood on your own hands.
What the heck,
Stephen?
on your monitor or something, So like, why would you? I don't know that there would be a business for that. I went there, but now that I think that, I wouldn't want to do that.
I could be wrong, and I didn't do intense research into this before I brought it up in the podcast. But I think that once you actually shoot the animal, then there's somebody from this service who like collects it and skins it, and you get sent the meat or whatever. Like,
Right.
you pay
Sounds
for
pretty
it,
terrible.
right?
I mean, I would never do it. I mean, I don't. I wouldn't
I'm not
kill
into
anything,
hunting
but
in real
yeah.
life.
Yeah,
anyway,
no, I'm not either.
but,
So
yeah.
what do you do for a living? I'm the guy that waits for the gun to bang, and then I cut the stuff up and send it to the American
Sure.
that paid for it.
You know what might be interesting? Something maybe like virtual golf, where you launch a golf ball and you have to adjust, the angle of the machine that shoots it, and you're trying to get it close to the hole, and you're competing against other people.
Ooh.
If anybody steals this idea, I say this on every podcast now. I want.
He has an idea at every podcast.
That's
Every
right. I
5
want at
minutes.
least a 20% equity chunk in your company if you steal my idea. But
Do we get free room and board with that, Ehrlich?
yeah, for those of you who don't watch the show Silicon Valley, you
should.
You should watch it just to catch Steven's references that he throws in here occasionally. But anyway,
They're quite often.
where are we here? Yeah, guys. Okay, let's. We had another topic on the list here. I guess we can throw this one out here for a quick discussion as well. A documentary was made recently about the startup community here in Kitchener, Waterloo. The name of the film is Startup Community.
I'm really excited about this one, and
Yeah.
I know you've seen it, Darren, and I haven't. So I've looked on their website, and I've watched their little trailers, 1 or 2 minutes of it, and I know we've got Lindsay and Taylor have agreed to come on the podcast, so they're coming up in another couple weeks.
They're the producer and director of this film.
Right.
Yep.
So it's basically talking about what we want to talk about, the local tech startup community, and how Kitchener-Waterloo is really sort of the Silicon Valley of Canada.
Right.
And it's got a ton of talent and a ton of ideas and a ton of energy, and there's some money here as well. And we've got some great success stories. And it's just a really vibrant tech community. And I think, Shrad, you can talk about that a little bit, because you had talked about thinking about moving from Halifax to here, moving your company, hadn't you?
Real quick, let me just mention the website for this, as we're talking, if anybody wants to look it up, is startupcommunityfilm.com, and you can see the trailer for this film. But yeah, before Shrad weighs in, I'll just mention too, having seen the film, I can say a big part of the message of this film is the idea that the Kitchener-Waterloo startup community is a supportive community, not a competitive community. So there are always people willing to help each other out, even if there's not necessarily something in it for you to help somebody else out. That's the community that has developed here, where there will be introductions made and connections to resources to help people succeed, because there is an atmosphere of helping others succeed here. So yeah, Shrad, I mean, has that been your experience and kind of interacting with the community in this part of the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a really awesome place. A lot of like-minded people, a lot of collaboration, and it's a community I think that any tech startup would benefit from. But all communities have good and bad.
Sure.
Kitchener-Waterloo definitely has more good than bad.
Sure.
But it's also, you come in and there are, people know each other for a long time here, because the community is very strong and very tight. But what's interesting is that people are very accessible,
Right.
very approachable. There is sort of a little bit of, I think, a chip on the shoulder from Toronto,
Right.
which makes it interesting because if you're in like San Francisco and you live in Silicon Valley, you don't really have that sort of they're in San Francisco and we're in Silicon Valley. There's really no.
It's all the same kind of ecosystem.
It's considered the same, exactly. I mean, many times you say, "Oh, that company's in Silicon Valley," but they're really in San Francisco,
Right.
and vice versa. But here, it definitely there's it's a bit more
some rivalry there.
just
or-
some rivalry, and I think there's a little bit of we have to prove ourselves
Right.
kind of attitude.
Now,
which,
have you participated both in the Toronto startup community as well as the Kitchener-Waterloo or maybe others as well? You say you've had some experience maybe in Silicon Valley as well, or
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
Silicon Valley is very different. People do think that Kitchener-Waterloo is similar, but actually, it's Silicon Valley is a lot more competitive because everyone's doing their own thing there, right? So if you go to an event, it's sort of like you have 2 seconds with each guy at the event, and it's what can you do for me? What can I do for you? If we cannot do anything for each other, we move on to the next person. So if you're not ready for that kind of dynamic, then you can't attend those parties,
right?
Because they're not there to be your friend. They're there to like move their startups along. And though, I mean, of course, you can make friendships anywhere,
Sure.
as you should. But that's really what that dynamic is in those areas. In Toronto, it's very much you do your own thing, I do my own thing, and we do it separately.
Right.
And when we come together, it's after 2 hours of being in traffic, so everyone's kind of grumpy, right? So it doesn't help that it's hard to access each other in that city. And so as a result, like all the communities that I've been in Toronto tend to be sort of isolated from each other. But Kitchener-Waterloo, you meet each other in minutes.
Right.
Everything's really close by, and I think that the rivalry is probably a good thing for right now, but I think it has to end because together, I think Waterloo and Kitchener-Waterloo and Toronto can be far more compelling as a unit than individually.
And because there's so many people there, you have to kind of do that speed dating thing. Whereas here in Kitchener-Waterloo, Darren and I have getting out into the community, we start to see the same faces occasionally. And so it seems like there's about 100 people that are really always trying to do something here locally. Whereas in Toronto, that might be 1,000. So you really have to be focused, or in San Francisco, 10,000, right? So
yeah, but I think there's also, sorry to interrupt, but I think there's a penalty for when you're not fully participating in the community.
Right.
And that's something that's very noticeable. And I think that's detrimental because it doesn't matter if you participate for like 3 days in a week or if you just come for a visit, you're adding something back into the community. And that's something that I think is a bit lost. For all its goodness, I think that's one thing that, that chip on the shoulder thing has to fly off the shoulder because at some point I think that's something that has to be recognized.
Sure. I think it's interesting that you brought up kind of geographic layout and traffic dynamics as affecting these kind of things, because you don't usually think about those things as affecting kind of the atmosphere of a community, right? But you're right. I mean, if you spend 2 hours in traffic to get to a meeting, it better be a meeting worth going to, right? It's not just going to be a hang out and shoot the breeze kind of thing necessarily.
Yeah.
And I think that here in KW, we can afford to sit down at Coffee Culture or Starbucks or something for half an hour and just kind of chat and not feel like it's a huge impact on our day in networking with people and stuff.
Well, every meeting in Toronto is 4 hours, right? 2 hours to get there, half an hour meeting, and then hopefully 1.5 hours to get back.
That's right. And I wonder if that's part of the reason why there hasn't been more collaboration between this area and that area. I know for me, when I think of having to drive to Toronto for a meeting, like that is an intimidating idea in my mind, right? Just dealing with traffic.
It's like having to call Bell or Rogers to have to deal with your cell phone.
That's right.
Your cable's like, I have to do it, but I don't want to.
That's right. And finding a parking place and paying for all that stuff. Like, that's all, in my mind, I'm like, it's just easier. Can't you guys just come to this part of the world where we have 2 hours of free parking anywhere downtown and, we can just sit and have a chat rather than go through all that hassle. But anyway, very interesting what comes into those dynamics. Well, listen, let's talk a little bit more here with you, Shrad. I think we'd like to hear, a bit of your story about where you came from and how you ended up where you are here and what you're doing. I'm assuming that Wagepoint isn't the first entrepreneurial endeavor that you've found yourself involved in. So maybe you can just kind of give us some of your past history and other things you've been working on before.
Yeah, for sure. So about 4 years ago, I was in Halifax.
Okay. And are you originally from Halifax?
No.
I don't hear the East Coast Canadian accent, so that's why.
I grew up in Dubai.
Okay.
That's where I came to Canada when I was 19 by myself. And so it's sort of an interesting experience coming from Dubai to a little town like St. John, New Brunswick.
Right.
So it's like going from a city with a few million people to a town with 50,000 people.
Wow. Talk about community.
Yeah.
And what brought you to Canada from Dubai? Of all the places in the world you could have gone to?
It was, when you live in a desert, if someone shows you a picture of water and trees, then it's like, wow, where is that place?
Sure. But there are water and trees in other places.
No, for sure. Yeah. And so really, for me, it was, I was looking for a place to go to school. Okay. And the University of New Brunswick actually did a pretty good job in Dubai.
Dalhousie University?
Not Dalhousie, no. University
it's
of New
just called University of New Brunswick.
Yeah. They did a pretty good job recruiting in Dubai for that year at least.
Sure.
And of course, it took me some time. Like I was sort of, foolish 19-year-old. I thought that there'd be jobs at the airport. Like it was that, like people would be just handing out things, and
Sure.
but of course, that's not how it was. It was very much an experience of. It's very. It's sort of it brings some humility into you. Like you sort of understand how people live on a much smaller scale than in a big city.
Sure.
But of course, it was very nerve-wracking because getting up to go to the bathroom at 3:00 in the morning, and there's no noise, and it's like there's no honking, there's nobody like yelling at someone. It's quiet.
Right.
And that part was it's hard to get used to, right? As a city kid.
Sure.
But of course, being a city kid, I've always been a city kid, so it was also difficult being in a small town.
Right.
But at the same time, I do think there was probably no other way for me to do it and experience all the things I had. I think I got a chance to see like real Canada, like what it's like to be to grow up in those towns.
Did you find like the entrepreneurial mindset to be much different in Canada than what you might have experienced back in Dubai?
Absolutely. Yeah? I mean, it's totally different. I mean, it's a culture difference, right?
Right.
I mean, Canadians tend to be more polite and I would say also a lot more passive. So, for example, if you send an email to a company and say, hey, I love your product, I got to use it, there's a good chance they're going to take a day to get back to you.
Right.
You know what I mean? Whereas in Dubai and most competitive environments, even in the US, it's like 5 minutes.
Right.
5 minutes later, there's a phone call because there's somebody that wants to be your customer. And so I think there's a difference in just the pace at which people do business.
Okay.
So there's
It's not quite island time. Have you ever been to Jamaica?
No.
Like they talk about being on a separate time zone or a separate time there. We're on island time. And I get that. I've lived in the U.S. for 20 years, so I feel that when I'm driving. I'm a much more aggressive driver after living in the U.S. for 20 years.
Absolutely.
And I get here, and there's less people on the road, but I can see it more, where I'm impatient. So It must have been really neat to come. It's almost trial by fire, coming from Dubai to Halifax, but it's not fire really. It's you were in the fire in the city, and now you come to the peace and the
actually
the
I was in St. John, New Brunswick.
St. John's.
So that's much smaller than Halifax.
Halifax, right?
So Halifax is around 400,000 people. So that's actually a little bit more reasonable.
So that's back
Sure.
to the city, right?
Yes,
But
exactly.
St. John's was a real shocker.
Yeah, St. John.
Wow.
Yeah, it was interesting though. I mean, I would never take any of this back because everything lends its experience, right?
Sure.
But I actually ended up after school. I got a job at Irving Oil.
Okay.
Actually, I did a stopover at a little town called Stellarton, which is where Sobeys head office is at.
Oh, interesting.
But that was a town of 15,000.
Oh, wow.
So I had to leave. So 6 months later, I ended up getting a job at Irving Oil in New Brunswick.
And what were you doing there? Accounting
No,
stuff?
I was a financial analyst.
Oh,
Well, what was
okay.
interesting is that I actually just made a cold call to Irving Oil. I just picked up the phone. I was graduating school and I needed a job. And you have to understand at that time, international students had 3 months to find a job from the date of the last exam.
Right.
So last exam, the clock starts ticking.
And what happens after those 3 months if you don't find a job?
You got to leave.
They just boot you out of the country?
Yeah, you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars here in Canada, and then they're like, leave.
Did they give you an email and give you at least a day?
Not even a kiss. No, nothing.
Oh.
It's
That is kind of crazy. You'd think it would
Yeah.
be in the best interest of the Canadian government to, if we're training international students, then have them contribute back to the economy here, right?
Well, so since at the year I left, they actually ended up changing some of those rules, but the of course not for me. So for me, I actually had those 3 months, and if you imagine going to your last exam knowing that your time starts now,
Yeah.
right? That's a very daunting. You can't really focus on your exam, right?
Right.
And so I ended up calling up Irving Oil, just the human resource department, saying, listen, I know you don't know me, I don't know you, but we have to meet, and here's why. And they met me, and they said there's a junior accountant position, but they took one look at me and they said, well, I think you're going to end up coming in, and going postal on all of us if we end up giving you this job. So
why did they think that?
because junior
though?
accounting jobs are very repetitive. It's it's very and it's really not in line with my personality.
They could
Okay.
see that you were more dynamic than shoving you in the corner.
Well,
Yeah,
and I think you probably proved that with cold calling them and saying, I need to have an interview right
just
now.
a little bit, yeah. So that didn't help, right? My case, and I was at that point, I was like, I don't care, give me any job, but they
How
knew
about
better.
sales?
Yeah, they knew
Well,
better, right?
yeah.
And so 6 months later they had a job, and that was perfect because I was just about to lose my mind in the 15,000 person town of Stellarton.
Sure.
So they were a great company. I spent 4 years there. I was a financial analyst. I did all kinds of interesting things.
Okay.
And really, what financial analysts do is they help the company make more money.
Right.
They tell them how to make more money, and that's that kind of analytical mindset was driven by my time at Irving.
Sure.
And then just about 2010, when I was sort of getting itchy feet because I'm sort of the kind of person that has always known that I was going to be an entrepreneur.
Sure.
So it's just a matter of when and how.
Yeah.
And when you're an international student, you have to figure out all the dynamics of the country that you've just moved to. I mean, Stephen, you know something about that, having migrated between two countries, right?
Yeah. Residency status issues and visas
all kinds
and
of
everything
things.
else,
Yeah.
right?
Darren's
And
been out of the country too. So
that itchy feet factor is very much, the mark of a true entrepreneur, right? You're never quite happy. You're never content exactly where you are. There's always a project in the back burner. There's always something, whatever the next step is, you're always working on it, right?
Absolutely.
In your mind.
And if anything, it's you have to learn how to focus.
Right. That's right.
That's the real problem, right?
Yep.
Because you're always trying to work on something that you think you're going to have experience 10 steps later.
Right.
Right? Like, so you're like, before you've built your product, you're already figuring out how to get customers. Right? So it's interesting. But anyway, long story short, which I guess you don't really want for this podcast.
Well, no, it's all good. We got lots of stuff we can talk about. Yeah.
So you're an in-house consultant, basically, and you're giving them advice on how to save money.
Well,
how to make money, man.
Yeah.
Save money or make money.
Yeah, but it's typically that's the kind of role that you have. You look at their picture of how they're making money today, and you come up with ideas on how to make more money.
Sure.
And of course, Irving is a massive company. And the culture of the company was excellent. Of Irving Oil, at least. I don't know about the rest of the Irvings, but certainly Irving Oil has...
JR, how is he?
I have no idea. I've heard rumors, but I will not say. I
They
actually
have a JR Irving at Irving?
I have no idea.
That was like an old Dallas reference or something. What was that old...
I think that's JR.
Who shot JR? Oh,
Ewing?
Yeah.
Oh.
This is Irving.
That doesn't fit.
You guys
at
are
all.
much better with your 80s TV references than I am.
It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. Oh well.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
But a good shot though.
Thank you. No pun intended.
This podcast is already going down.
Yeah, it always runs off the rails at some point in the middle here.
Yeah, we're early today for running off the rails. Actually.
So you were ready to move on from Irving.
Yeah, and so the next thing that I had to do was I started doing what I like to call founder dating. You're looking for somebody that has similar value sets but complements you in skills that are totally different.
And what kind of skills were you specifically looking for in a founder when you were doing your founder dating?
If you had asked me at that time, I would have no idea.
Okay.
But
when I see it, I'll know it, kind of thing?
When I see it, I would know it. And to be very frank, I knew that when I met the right person, I would know him from a distance. Like I would just know that this was the right person.
Sort of jog towards each other, arms outstretched across a field of daisies.
That's the only way to
Slow
do it.
motion.
That's the
The
only
wind
way
blowing in your hair.
Yeah. and in many ways, that's really what it's like. I can see the camaraderie between you two. You're about to hug any minute.
Yeah. We're holding hands under the table.
Exactly. So, I mean...
be happy you can't see us, folks.
No, I'm witnessing it, and it's pretty gruesome, I have to be honest.
Oh, dear.
But yeah, I mean, that's really what it is. For me, I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know what product I was going to build, but I knew I didn't want to do it alone. Mm-hmm. That's the most important thing, right? Like you need a camaraderie with somebody. Yeah. You need a friend.
Yeah.
Because being an entrepreneur is a very tough thing, and especially when you don't come from money and you're starting from zero, right?
And it's lonely because somebody has to believe in you, and at least hopefully you yourself are believing in you. But there are so many people out there who will tell you the hundreds of reasons why whatever you're trying to do won't work.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so it definitely does help to have somebody else who's standing beside you saying, no, we're going to do this, we're going to make this happen, and here's how we're going to do it, right? So I completely understand where you're coming from there.
And in those areas, like in Atlantic Canada, the culture is the business culture is even more different than it is here in Toronto.
Okay.
In Toronto, it was sort of kind of a pleasant change because in Atlantic Canada, if you don't have a history with this person or in some way, either your kids play in hockey together or, you go to the same church or whatever it is. And I wasn't about to go and have a child just so that I could, break into the business community, right?
Sure.
But there are those sort of challenges that to get into the community. So there's totally a different mindset too. They also have a chip on their shoulder when it comes to Toronto and
Ontario.
Yeah, exactly. So you're sort of battling all these forces, and you're looking for somebody that, in a way, is not ingrained with some of those that baggage, right?
Yeah, someone who's not
it's really
so cynical and a little open-minded, I would hope.
Yeah, a lot of relationship-based, really. Like they're talking about fit. Like, do I know you?
Totally.
Do you fit with me? Do I have anything in common with you?
Yeah.
And then I'll talk to you. Whereas Toronto is more, I don't need to know you. What can you do for me? And if in 30 seconds, if we can't figure that out, we don't need to have anything in common.
Absolutely.
But I think relationships are important no matter where you're working, right? Like you might have that initial spark, or it might be something where you have a common utility you can help each other out with. But in the long run, if you're in business with someone that you can't get along with on a personal level, it's going to fail at some point, right?
It's chemistry, right? Chemistry is really important, and really, as you build your business, chemistry and everything is important. Yeah. So even if it's your brand and the customer has to feel a certain kind of way about you and about your company, and if they don't feel it, then they don't do business with your company. It's that simple.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so but just to go back to Atlantic Canada, because a lot of people don't understand these things about living in those environments. It's a very, very close community. Once you break in, it's great, but it takes time to break in.
Right.
And as someone that's coming from the outside that doesn't come with all that history, it was challenging. I think the bigger problem in those areas, to be honest, is the fact that if you don't follow the traditional path, if you try a business and it fails, that's actually not a good thing in those environments, right? They don't celebrate failure at all.
Right. And in a lot of the more established kind of, especially technical startup communities, failure is something that's more celebrated, right? You've had your first 2 or 3 failures, and now you can take the lessons from that and move on.
Yeah, you got your feet wet. You're stronger for having. If it didn't kill you, you're stronger, kind of a mentality, and keep going.
That's right. So it's interesting to hear that it's a different perspective.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? People don't live there. I mean, a lot of people don't live there, or have never visited, so they don't understand it. But those are some of the things that are actually holding those areas back. Now, Halifax is slightly different because Halifax actually does have a bit of a counterculture. It's interesting. There's lots of cool people there, lots of smart people there, and that's actually where I ended up finding my co-founder and my business partner, Bill Murphy.
And can I just ask about that whole co-founder dating process? What did that process look like? Are you looking at people's Twitter accounts or going through LinkedIn profiles? Or are you just calling people up and saying, "Hey, do you know somebody who might want to go into business with me?" Like, what did that look like for you?
Did you use an app?
Yeah, I wish there was an app for that. No, actually, there is now. At that time and that area, because I'd lived there for almost like 8 or 9 years, I had somewhat of a network, and I started looking right in that network at first. And it really was just going out, getting to know each other for like an hour, pretty much a new person every day of the week.
Wow.
So it was like 60 or 70 guys that I actually just hung out with socially.
Like grabbing a coffee or a beer or something?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. And then in the end, it was really about just getting to know them and getting to understand who they were. Not so much what we were going to do together, because really 2 people who have a good value set and sort of see a lot of things similar, but the right kind of things different. Right. You can make anything happen.
Sure.
Right. So it was really, that's for me, people play such a big role in how you enjoy your life and the experiences that you have, that surrounding yourself with the right people meant a lot to me.
Sure.
And because when you're in corporations, you get stuck with whoever you get stuck with, right?
Right.
But in a company that you're building, you get to choose.
So when you do that process, you must have to do a lot of introspection, because you have to know yourself, to know your weaknesses, to know what you need to bring to the party, or what to look for, right? So At the beginning, you said you didn't know what you were looking for, but did you spend some time thinking about, what do I not do well? Or what do I do really well, therefore I need somebody to do this really well, because I'm too busy doing what I do?
Yeah, absolutely.
How did you identify those characteristics or those passions in somebody else?
I think self-awareness is a huge part of being an entrepreneur.
Right.
Because if you're not aware of your own positives and negatives, right? If you're not able to actually think about yourself and actually think about how you would approach something, you could never figure out how to motivate anybody or how to inspire anybody else.
Sure.
It's just not possible. So I think that's a huge part of it. And self-awareness also means knowing when to say my bad, right? Like when I've done something wrong, because we've all been there. Nobody's perfect, right? So I think that's very true. I think that knowing yourself is more important than anything else, because at that point is when you get to figure out who fits with you.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
Now you say you found a co-founder in Halifax then, and did you guys dive right into Wagepoint, or did you have another startup or two that you worked on first?
No, we totally had lots of paths that we took before we got to Wagepoint.
Do you feel comfortable sharing any of those with us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all it's all in the history books.
First you tried Twitter. You invented Twitter.
Yeah, and then they stole it from me.
Yeah.
But I mean, and that's the other thing. So building the kinds of businesses, it really doesn't matter again what you build. It's who you do it with, right?
Sure.
So Bill at that time was involved in a project called Our Town Earth that was sort of a social network for persons with disabilities, and he asked me if I could help out. And so if you really think about it, here I had like pretty much like very little savings in the bank account, and I'm like giving myself 1 year to figure out how I'm going to make this entrepreneurship thing work.
Right.
And so once I found the guy, it was about now he needs to feel comfortable with me.
Yeah.
So we are about 20 years in our age difference. So he's 52, I'm 32.
Wow.
So there's, not that there's a generational gap, but, for him, it was like, I have to now see if this kid can actually do what he's saying he can do, right?
Right.
And so
trust but verify.
Exactly. So it was really about. So we spent the next year working on this project together, and it's at that time that I learned the only two things that I think mattered from a tech perspective. One, how to build products for cheap. In a way that you can get someone to part with something, whether it's an email or cash or whatever it is, at the smallest possible spend.
Right.
And that's what like lean startups and MVPs and stuff are about. But really, it's about finding that smallest piece of value in which somebody's going to give you something in exchange for.
Right.
And like a Yo.
Yeah.
Have you heard of this app, Yo? We discussed it on our last podcast, which I'm sure you haven't listened to yet.
Because it's about 3 minutes old.
Yeah. There was an app we talked about yesterday that all the app does was send the word Yo to somebody else. That's the entire app.
And they got funded for $1 million out of Silicon Valley.
So these are first world problems.
Yes. But sorry, continue with your story.
So just to get back to it, it was, like I said, it was about the Our Town Earth. We switched it to Sociability.
Okay.
We bought the domain for like $3,000.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and which was which was probably the best investment we made, because it ended up it's a one-word domain, right? So
yeah, sure.
It ended up actually increasing in value.
Oh,
just the domain.
Oh, so you were able to profit on the sale of that domain later on?
Well, unfortunately, the rest of the project was so expensive that it really didn't matter.
Fair enough.
But I came at a very late point where we were sort of doing a version 2.0. And so what I learned through that was, how to, like I said, how to take very little money and make it go a very long way.
Sure.
And then the second thing that I learned was, so the first thing was, like I said, just building a product of value as cheap as you can.
Yep.
And the second thing was getting customers and getting traction. So I started reading everything you can imagine about digital marketing.
Right.
Everything that meant, like, anybody that had any repute online, I would just devour it.
Sure.
And how were those resources? Were they fairly up to date, or it's a fairly new space? So is there anything written about that was of any value?
Well, I think around 2008 is when, you started to see it sort of bubble back up to the surface, all the things around digital marketing.
Right.
And by the time I touched it, was 2010. So it was still early, but not so early that it was nascent.
Right.
I mean, there was a lot of good resources, but of course, all of this landscape changes so much every 6 months that you have to pretty much keep up with it. So that really became the focus of my life, and all I did was study and learn and test and fail and grow. And then, of course, it came time to when I was not drawing anything from this project. So, a year passed very quickly, surprisingly.
Yeah.
Especially when you're having fun, that happens.
Sure.
And it came to a point where I told Bill, I said, look, this is just not going anywhere from a project perspective. So we had another idea about building a scheduling app, which is another thing that we tried simultaneously with Wagepoint.
Right.
The idea was to eventually pick one that just we had to double down on.
Right.
And when it came down to it, when we came to the idea of automating payroll and making it fast and friendly and simple and fun, it became a project because it became the project to double down on, because it was something that actually fulfilled a very immediate need.
Sure.
Because when do people need payroll software? It's typically when they hire their first employee.
Right.
There's very few things in the world that you would need when you hire your first employee.
Right.
But you're going to need payroll software.
Right.
And so and when we looked at the space, when we looked at the incumbents in the space, we were like, man, this is so old school. These guys are so massive that they can do nothing about innovation at this point.
Right.
So why don't we actually step up? And then, of course, our plans started getting more ambitious every day, as they always do.
Scope creep.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys know all about it.
Yeah.
And so it really became about, how could we build this so that we could deploy it in every country possible?
Wow.
And if you can imagine how complex payroll rules are in every country,
yeah, absolutely.
To be able to do that required a unique set of magic and talent.
And this is just Bill and you at this point?
It was just Bill and I at this point, yeah.
And who wrote all the code for how that works?
It was so that's what ended up happening is we started with version 1.0 as we always do.
Yeah.
But before that we decided to see what customers, if we could get customers to what I like to call hamsterware version of our product.
Sure.
And so hamsterware was us we had someone who was a payroll specialist on staff that would essentially take the phone calls and the emails and process payroll virtually as a service for companies.
Right.
And so we threw up a page, a landing page, a website that said, hey, if you're looking for payroll, just drop your information here and we'll get back to you. And then and there's like a few hundred signups that came through over a course of like 6 months.
Wow.
And we called every single one of them.
The next day?
No, right away. That's part of my city culture, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no time for anything, so got to get on. Yeah, right on it.
So you are the change. You're being the change you want to see, yeah?
And
yes, Obama.
That's
true.
I like it.
And did you then contract out the technical work that needs to be done to set up that platform, or?
So I mean that's a really tough thing, right? Like I mean, getting to the tech is actually very hard.
Sure.
Because now you have to start to find the right people to do it for you. And if you can imagine finding someone that has payroll background as well as technology background is pretty much impossible, right?
Sure.
Sort of like finding, I like to say it's like looking for a needle in a haystack in Mars, with a little magnifying glass under a thick sheet of ice.
Right.
So it's like it's as big a challenge as you can find. So and really for us what it was is once we understood exactly what we were going to build, that's when we wanted to start to look for that resource.
Right.
It wasn't before, let's do it together kind of thing. It was let's be very, very clear and definitive of what we're going to do.
Right.
And we could not have done that without the customer development that we did initially.
Sure.
Because I hadn't run payroll before. I'd barely looked at my pay stubs, right?
Sure.
So how do you know what to build unless you actually ask the people who are going to use it?
Right.
And these are established concepts now, right? But even at that time, it was, the lean startup and stuff was just starting out. It just made logical sense to do it like that.
Yeah.
And so again, I should stop saying that.
You can make it short now because we're coming up on an hour, but yeah. So you found someone that had that unique combination of skill set?
Yeah. So it's a matter of looking under every possible rock that you can.
Right.
And it's being in the right, sort of environments where you think somebody like this might hang out.
Sure.
And so we ended up finding the perfect guy, and his name is Ryan Deneen.
Okay.
And he was awesome. And it wasn't just the technical capabilities, it was the attitude.
Sure.
It was that he had the perfect attitude.
Sure.
He's no ego, no attachment to his work. It's about what is going to help the customer.
Wow.
And so our entire company focus is about the customer. We don't like our org chart starts with the customer, and then it has what we call customer success in one circle. Then we have product success in another circle, and then we have growth success.
Right.
What chart are you referring to?
It's an org chart that we built called circles.
So what is that? explain that to our listeners?
It's,
Because I obviously know what that is, but I don't know if everybody does.
It's for the benefit of
yes, just the listeners.
yeah,
sure.
of course.
What chart again?
So it's based around the idea of almost like a buddy type system around managing people. It's totally something that we've devised on our own, from our own brains. We know how we all like to be treated as people,
Right.
And we like to build. My whole idea is I've always wanted to build a company that I would want to work at.
Sure.
And that's hard. It's a hard thing to do because you really, when you work for other people, you can criticize them all you want, right? But when you want to build your own company, then how do I build this so that everyone's happy? And that's very, very hard to do.
Yeah.
So we came up with this idea of putting people in circles, sort of like a Google circle, if you will. And the idea was that the circles overlapped each other almost like an atom.
Right.
Again, it goes back to my love for space and science.
Sure.
And of course the top of that circle, all the circles would be enveloped by a larger one. And it's harder to describe it on radio, obviously.
Yeah, it sounds like something you have to see, maybe.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
very visual.
Yeah. And it's something that we're happy to share with people when they ask us.
Sure.
But the idea is to build a system where everyone is so integrated with each other and tightly woven with each other that you can move as a unit very quickly.
Right.
Which is the most important thing for companies our size and at our age.
Let me just ask you here, Shrad, because we don't have a lot of time left. I don't want to go too much over an hour here, but Wagepoint then, where are you guys at today as far as Wagepoint's growth and development? And if one of our listeners thinks to themselves, I need to get my payroll straightened out somehow, how can they connect with Wagepoint and make use of your services? What are you able to offer somebody that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now where we're at is we launched in Canada in the summer of last year. Okay. We have about 500 customers right now on our app, just under 4,000 or just over 4,000 employees that we pay. It's a huge responsibility, right? Because we run millions of dollars through our bank account.
Sure.
Of course, these are payrolls, so it's a huge responsibility for us to be able to manage and track everything. And this is kind of my background in financial accounting, and Bill is a CA, so we have all of that stuff kind of taken care of, which is really important.
Of course, yeah.
And really, what the product does is it allows someone in very few minutes to log in, sign up, set themselves up in very few minutes, and actually get to the point where they can pay their employees, remit all the taxes to the government, even things like WCB, EHT, all the things that people don't think about, but we can do all of it.
Sure.
And for all the provinces in Canada, including Quebec, which unfortunately is many times a victim of, most people don't pay attention to it when they build payroll software.
There's lots of exceptions in there in Quebec,
absolutely.
Right, in Canada. Yeah. And did I hear something about launching in the US?
Yeah, so that's true. Last month we soft launched in the US.
Okay.
We already have some US customers, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
For a little startup that's in Halifax and Kitchener-Waterloo to be paying somebody's employees in Missouri.
Yeah,
that's just surreal, right?
Yeah.
But very cool. And so we just launched in the US, and we're looking for, of course, as many. Our whole plan is growth.
Of course.
We're interested in growth, but not to sacrifice the customer's success in that. And I know it's it sounds trite when you constantly talk about the customer, but we totally love them. We love our customers. It's because when somebody is willing to actually reach into their pocket and pay you for a service that they think is valuable that you provide, you cannot be more grateful to anybody but those people.
Of course.
Those are your bosses, right? And I've always sort of had a bit of an issue with this whole concept of a boss, which is one of the reasons we have this circles concept and whatnot. But the idea to me is that if you're going to have a boss, it should be your customer.
Absolutely. That's the new metric, right? Companies are now looking at the customer to tell them how they're doing, as opposed to their own metrics to tell them how they're doing,
Absolutely.
like food cost or percentages of operating.
Absolutely. So if anyone's interested in getting payroll, we're very affordable, very fast, and I promise you it'll always be fun to deal with us. Those three things, if you're interested in that, then you listener, please come to us, come find us at wagepoint.com.
Wagepoint.com. Okay, and do you guys have a Twitter account or a Facebook page and all
it's
that
all
kind of
Wagepoint.
stuff? Yeah.
Yeah, we've kept it pretty simple. So you can find us on Twitter. Our handle is Wagepoint.
Okay.
Facebook is also our company page is Wagepoint.
Okay.
So please come in and check us out, and we'll be happy if you mention this podcast. I'm pretty sure we'll be able to work something out for you in terms of a discount. So we'll find out how many people are actually listening in.
Sure. Once we have some employees to pay on the podcast, then absolutely.
The simple, fast, and friendly way to pay your employees.
That's right. Well, thank you, Shrad. That's awesome. I wish we had more time because I think you have a lot of incredible insights just into the startup world in general, and especially from your own wealth of experience and working in so many different startup communities, across Canada and dabbling a bit in Silicon Valley as well. Every time we have, these guests, I always think to myself, if only we could make this a 3-hour podcast. I think
I think only we would be interested in that.
We'll see. If our listeners really want that long, then you guys can let us know. But let's wrap things up here. So thank you, Shrad, for coming and talking to us today. His company, once again, is Wagepoint. You can find that at wagepoint.com. Their motto is the simple, fast, and friendly way to pay your employees. Is that right?
That's right.
There you go.
Friendliest team in the world.
Awesome. Awesome. And thank you, listeners, for joining us on another episode of TSP Weekly. Special thanks once again to the Center of Entrepreneurship here at Conestoga College for letting us record here. We are planning on having Andrew Finkel from Structured 3D Printing, or maybe it's just Structured Printing.
Structured. Yes. Yeah, I'm not
they
sure.
They have an odd way of writing. They use the 3D as part of the ED on structured. So we'll say Structured Printing on next week's show. So keep your eyes out for that episode. Please feel free to send us your comments, questions, criticisms, feedback by email at feedback@tspweekly.com. You can follow us on Twitter at tspweekly, or just go straight to our website, tspweekly.com. You can download any past episodes there or leave comments on the site as well. So, from myself, Darren Conley, my co-host Stephen Campbell, and our guest Shrad Rao from Wagepoint, thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you all next week.